Hello and welcome back to Something Rotten. This is our last episode of Season 4. We've talked about The Darkness, we've talked about The Darkness 2, and now we are going to hear from you, pointing my finger at the camera. This is our...
You, shake that soldier boy.
That's right, we're going to hear from Soldier Boy.
I said shake that soldier boy. Sorry, I'm interrupting. I said shake that soldier boy. It's crank that soldier
Yeah, of course.
boy, and I apologize.
When I was going to
Sorry.
40 bar mitzvah parties in 1 year, in the year 2007 and 8, and every single party played Crank That Soldier Boy. I got pretty good at that dance, Blake.
Hey, here's a question. As I don't know, I'd like to say the foremost voice in games criticism right now. Is the Soldier Boy review of Braid the single greatest piece of video game criticism and one of the most important pieces of media criticism of our generation?
I think so. I think that really, you can look at games criticism as pre and post Soldier Boy reviews Braid. He really changed everything.
That's right. What year was that?
2007? I don't know. When did Braid come out? It was one of those very first.
Braid on Steam. Here we go. 2009. So here's the interesting thing.
Yeah, 2008 was when it was released on Xbox, I think.
Well, here's the interesting thing historically is that means Braid or Soldier Boy reviewing Braid and Killscreen would have launched within about a year of each other. So it truly was a new era for game criticism.
I do also think we can thank Soldier Boy for fracturing Jonathan Blow's brain in a way that has led him down the path that he's on now, where if he hadn't done that, we might still think of Jonathan Blow as like a normal man. And now we know. Not true.
Yeah, speaking of not normal, do you hear that?
Is Reagan going nutty? For the I'm looking at a video of Blake's residence right now. Every so often, just this little creature wanders into the back of the camera and just looks around. It looks like you're living with just this like mythical beast.
It's a Wendigo back there. Someone rang my doorbell. I'm just not going to answer it. It doesn't matter. I don't know who it is, why they're bothering me, but it set Reagan off. Anyway, what's up, Jacob? What are we doing? Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw John Wick 4 yesterday. Oh,
yeah?
It's cool.
Is John Wick a rotten series?
No.
No?
No, definitely not. It's, no. I don't have a better explanation. It's just not.
Okay. I feel like he shoots enough men point blank in the head to give it at least a little bit of rottenness.
Here's the thing I want to say about John Wick 4. I said John Wick 3, didn't I?
No, you said
I saw
4.
John Wick 4. Okay. Look, when they're killing, yes, sir. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil anything because I know you're seeing it today. That's a 2.5-hour movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's an 1.5-hour cut of that movie where they cut out most of the story, and let me tell you, a better film. Good
That's
Lord.
kind of always the story of John Wick.
Yeah.
I mean, people love that Baba Yaga shit. Not for me.
Yeah, but hey, Rina Sawayama, give her an Oscar for one.
Oh, I actually saw someone else say that on Twitter this morning. Excited to see it.
That she goes so hard in this movie. Can't wait.
I'm seeing it with both AJ Moser and my father, who heard that we were watching John Wick and said, "Can I come?" And I always think, I included this in a line in the video that I made on headshots like years ago. But watching John Wick 1 with my dad was like, he's using his pistol like a staple gun. That he never pulls the trigger more than 3 inches away from his target. And that image has always stuck with me.
People are really into, in the Resident Evil 4 remake, that Leon will hold his gun John Wick style when enemies are really close to him.
Look, I'm really into that too.
It's good. It's good stuff. John Wick 4 is pretty cool. Gave it a 3 on Letterboxd, which I feel like is a good score for a John Wick film. They go hard, but they are unbelievably stupid. You know what I'm saying?
That's the beauty of them. Well, Blake, let's jump into questions. We've had lots of questions written to us at somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com. Also some from Twitter, also maybe some from my Discord. We'll see. But this first one is from Catherine Bellingham. And they write, mediums like film utilize techniques such as changing the pace of editing, adjusting aspect ratios, or intentional compositional choices to try and convey the experience of a character in any given situation. With most mediums of art, we're almost always a spectator. However, video games routinely frame the audience as the character, giving us the ability to directly or indirectly control their actions and choices. Simultaneously, I personally find video games frequently utilize very uninspired methods to try and convey these experiences to the audience. Things like a simple visual filter to convey, quote, insanity, or anxiety in the protagonist of a horror game, or scrambled controls for a character that's under the influence of alcohol. Either that, or completely dodging their direct impact by representing it as a simple numerical debuff. Mechanics that have the potential to frustrate the audience or even generate misconceptions surrounding issues like mental health or substance abuse. How would you try to convey the difficulties or effects that something like addiction with the unique elements that video games as a medium possess? Or has there been a video game that has represented these struggles in an effective way?
Yes. The Last of Us Part 2. Lost in the conversation about The Last of Us Part 2 is that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know. I've never talked to Neil Druckmann. It works as a remarkable allegory or metaphor, whichever one you want to say, for addiction. I've written about this in the past for, oh God, who was it? Unwinnable, I think. And while it doesn't do anything necessarily unique with its mechanics, the nature of the story, that Ellie is constantly perpetuating the cycle of violence, and then as the player, just by the fact you have to go through level after level of said violence, is this like repetitive action that like mirrors real world addiction. In a way that I think that game makes that game very good narratively and mechanically. I guess not so much the Abby section, but like the Ellie section for sure.
Well, that's an interesting point, because what do you think being a game adds to that kind of metaphor? Because, you know, it's like Ellie is not literally taking drugs or drinking or whatever.
Right.
And so it is, you know, it is working in the realm of you know, metaphor. And since it's mostly the story, you know, what does having your hands on the controller do for you?
Oh, sure. I think it's like the fact that you are constantly doing this destructive behavior over and over, despite probably, like, unless you're a sociopath or someone who makes Last of Us kill compilations on YouTube, not wanting to at some point, you know, like the game is very much feeding, like directing you towards, hey, you maybe should feel bad about this or not want to kill this specific person, or like the Nora scene, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which is undercut by how fun the game is, but
well, I mean, wouldn't that add to the metaphor?
Oh, sure, I guess so. In some ways, like the game being fun.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I respect your take on this. It is not one that I don't know. I feel like if that's the argument, then there are lots of games where you do bad things and you want to stop and keep doing them. And I'm not quite sure what The Last of Us 2, what makes it uniquely evocative of this theme.
Sure. Well, here's what I'll tell you, Jacob. Go to unwinnable.com, read The Last of Us Part 2 over and over again, written by Blake Hester, and you'll get a like 2,000 word story about it.
Okay, let's try this at the same time.
You can hear Something Rotten early and ad-free on Nebula, and hear bonus episodes too. And Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days, one of the best games ever made.
Oh wait, that wasn't in the script.
We had a script? But like, more to the question, like, what mechanics do we think could, like, what was it, like, what do we think could convey addiction really well?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to go back and talk about kind of the middle of this question, which I think is really interesting, and I also think we both agree with, which is like, there are lots of storytelling methods that different mediums use to like put you in the role of a character, or just set you in a place, or do whatever, and video games are pretty lazy about that. And I think that's a great point, and I feel like it's almost, you know, when we talk about like being in a character, the the quote-unquote immersion within a character in a game is so obvious because you were, like, controlling where they walk and look, that I feel like a lot of games are like, all right, we did it. You know, it's like, we don't have to do any more work because you're controlling them. That's all we need to do to, like, put you in the character. And that leads to, you know, kind of boring things like, oh, the controls are crazy because you're drunk or whatever.
Yeah. You know that scene in Red Dead 2 where you get drunk with Lenny and it's real fun?
Sure do.
But you're constantly flashing between, like, I guess small vignettes, but, like, there's no, like, you're not seeing the in-between motions. It's almost like a French New Wave film, you know, they trust you to figure out that they got there in some ways. But, like, you're flashing between all these disparate moments, and you're not sure how you exactly got there. I think if you removed the quirkiness and fun of that and kind of made a game that flashes between different scenes in that way, like, how did I get here? What is happening? That could be a really interesting way to represent addiction, because at least for me as an alcoholic, there were definitely times I could have nights like that where I would just get too drunk, and they were not necessarily fun as Arthur and Lenny had. I think that would be very hard to build as a game, you know, Red Dead.
Will you ever play the indie game 30 Flights of Loving?
No,
it's a classic. It probably came out in like 2011, 2012. Is a game that is highly edited in a way that games are not, where, like, you will jump from scene to scene. You will, like, smash cut into a new scene with no explanation of how you got there. And there's one, I think, in which they are drinking and then it changes, but it is more like, it's one of the most, like, oh my god, what's going on? How did I get here? And it's like a heist story, and so it's very cool. But yeah, it's hard to do that.
I think something like that would be cool. Yeah. Or like, what is that game? The one you like where you blink.
Oh, before your eyes. Yeah.
Something like that would maybe be interesting. Maybe not every blink, but, like, if you had some mechanic tied where it's like, once you do this thing, you're going to flash to a different place and you're not going to be sure how you got there. And it's probably going to be embarrassing, and your character will pee their pants in public, which I have done.
The kind of numerical debuff side of things, I think, can actually be pretty effective. You know, always go back to Disco Elysium. One of the problems, I think, with Disco Elysium is it's too easy to be sober. Because your character is supposed to be an alcoholic, but there is, and I haven't played this, but there's a higher difficulty level in which the skill checks are harder and drugs and alcohol give you more of a boost. And, you know, but within the game, they also give you, like, significant debuffs at the same time. And so, like, I do think, you know, that difficulty is trying to kind of force you into, you are a guy who has to drink to get through the day or whatever, but also it's going to fuck you up. I haven't played that difficulty, so I have a hard time saying how effective it is. I mean, we spent a lot of the Max Payne series talking about how it does and doesn't handle addiction well. I think gameplay-wise, probably not very well, right?
No.
Like, most of the interesting things happen in cutscenes in that game.
But those cutscenes are good. Like, they have kind of a flat jumping around quality to that Red Dead scene that I like. Also, Max just does weird shit while he's drunk, like shaving his head or staring at his hands, and it's like, yep, that fucking happens.
Right.
But I have shaved my head while like relapsing before. That totally, I did that. That was his act getting sober. But you know, whatever.
Yeah, that speaks to, like, hey, you know, Rockstar's good at liking movies and doing things that movies do.
Yeah. Damn, my life like a movie for real.
You want to read the next question?
Imagine if for The Darkness 3 they got Tom Waits to play God. Imagine a messed up voice off between Mike Patton and Tom Waits. Imagine them recording a duet for the end credits. As Jacob would phrase it, I think about this a lot. All the best, with love from Sweden. Jacob. Oh, there we go. Do you listen to Tom Waits?
No, I don't.
Oh, man. He's so good. I listened to the piano. Well, I read this question yesterday, and I listened to The Piano's Been Drinking, and I was like, he's just the best. He's just the best.
I mean, I do I do think a thing that we would both agree on, due to our love of the Bayonetta franchise, is that, like, fucked up heaven is so good as an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like, going to hell, that's fine. You can put demons there, you can do whatever. But, like, messed up angels doing messed up biblical angels is just so... I will never get tired of that shit. And so if that was what the Darkness 3 was going for, where you're going and killing, archangels and stuff,
yeah,
sounds good to me. All right, we got a little history here that we talked about a little bit, but I think this is fascinating. Just finished your Darkness 1 retrospective and enjoyed it. Basically, this person is saying the team behind Riddick and the Darkness is basically the same team as Machine Games. There's an old investigative article on the collapse of Starbreeze's internal dev team back in 2010, where the original team felt they couldn't make these specific first-person story-driven games there anymore, so they formed a new studio, Machine Games. And then a fun fact, the upcoming Indiana Jones game from Machine Games has Jens Anderson on board as lead designer, who is lead on Riddick and the Darkness. So basically, the old Starbreeze team is back together.
Also, really quick, that story, if you want to read it, is called The Secret History of the Riddick Team. It's published by 1UP. You can access it on the Wayback Machine. It was written, Jacob, by my close personal friend, and I mean that literally, Matt Liam.
Look, there are only 4 people who work in the games industry, so...
And only one of them that Blake is friends with, which is Matt. So shouts out to his story, and go check it out.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I've been thinking about those Wolfenstein games a lot recently. I
have too. I watched your video about them the other day. I had never seen it.
It's like the thing is they are too full of heart and meaningfulness to be rotten games. But at the same time, like, the way they depict Nazis, the first game has a level in a death camp, and it's, like, done well, which is just the most impossible feeling thing. It's like, I never would I want the challenge of being like, make a first-person shooter level set in a concentration camp and make it, like, sensitive. And they somehow managed to pull it off while also having a mech crush a Nazi's head in that same level.
You know what it's time for, Jacob?
What?
Well, let's see. New Order will be 10 next year. Someone needs to write an oral history of that game, because the fact they got that thing going at all is crazy to me.
Yeah, well, and they claim to be making a third one. Like I know they made Youngblood, but even then the messaging was like that game that is chronologically set in the future of the franchise, and they kind of said we're going to make a Wolfenstein 3 that's an immediate follow-up to 2.
Yeah.
But they're making this Indiana Jones game, and we haven't even seen a trailer for that, so I've got to imagine Wolfenstein 3, if it ever happens, is going to be many years from now.
Okay, so this is two... Well, one's a question, and the other is a comment, but I have combined them together. The first comes from email, the other was a DM sent to me. Mm-hmm. This comes from Joshua. Hey, just started listening to Something Rotten from Manhunt 1 and was excited when you started doing The Darkness because there was a small NPC scene that I saw recently that stuck in my mind. Then when you mentioned one of the late game NPCs trying to use queer as a slur towards Jackie, it got me wondering if you found LGBTQ plus representation common in Rotten games, either positive or negative, or is it just kind of sidestep most of the time? And then Dante wrote in about a similar thing and said, I don't know if this is the right place to let you know, but in The Darkness there's a joke about trans people. It's kind of pro-trans. Considering it was 2007, I laughed and took it well. It's like a guy showing indifference that a girl he's taking for a date is trans.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, they sent in the same clip, these two people, which is in like the basement of, I don't know, Johnny Six Fingers or whoever you're going to kill in The Darkness. There's just
pizza.
There's a conversation between two guys where one of them's like, hey, can you patrol tonight? And the other guy's like, no, I got a date with that stripper. And he says, the stripper with the huge tits. Sorry. And then they talk for a while, and then walking away, one of the guys says, I want to get the phrasing right. I believe he says, like, you know that stripper's a guy, right? Or something.
Right.
And the other and the other guy says, so?
Yeah.
Which is, it is, there are certainly many worse jokes about trans people. I don't think it's particularly sensitive. It feels very much like just the kind of joke that movies made about, like, haha, sometimes strippers, they're traps. They're not the gender you expect them to be. They don't have the organs you whatever. Like all that kind of dumb Ace Ventura bullshit. This one,
on the other hand,
yeah.
In 2007, this was the most progressive thing in video game history.
That is maybe true. So I give The Darkness credit for the guy not being like, ugh, barf, but I still think that the joke is essentially like, haha, look at this dumb guy. He's about to go out with a trans woman or something. I don't think they thought critically about it at all. It's just the kind of joke that is in mafia stories. Anyway, the larger question of LGBTQ representation in these games.
I mean, keeping in mind, we're two straight guys talking about this. I haven't, at least in the games we've played, noticed much. And if I've noticed any, it probably hasn't been good.
Oh, I would say it's been almost universally terrible. Yeah. I can't think of a single positive representation. Exactly. I mean, in The Darkness, they yell things. They yell kind of queer as a slur at him. I'm trying to remember. It feels like there must have been something in Manhunt, but maybe.
Oh yeah, but like, there's no way that was good.
Oh, no. I was just trying to remember something terrible. Yeah, I mean, the kind of the casual, like, I am sure that in many games we've played, people have been referred to as like, hey, this cocksucker's doing this or whatever, which is like, a very casual form of homophobia. I think both, the era that most of these games come from, which is 2011 and before generally, games have been, there were some games that were good about these, but most games have been real stupid about this for a long time. And the fact that that these games are usually trying to portray a world that is just cruel and shitty to everyone. Usually when that happens, we've talked about women generally getting fucked over by these stories. Other oppressed groups do as well. It's like when they're like, the whole world's bad, usually anyone who has it bad in our world is going to get it extra bad in these.
Next question.
In the final Manhunt episode, you talked for a bit about rotten games about Vietnam. There's one that mentioned that you didn't mention that popped up in my mind. It was called Viet Cong. And I think it managed to be way darker and rotten than any American game on the topic, only due to the fact that it was developed in the Czech Republic. Not sure how playable or buyable this game is nowadays, but I remember playing it as a kid. It came out in 2003, 2004, and I remember some fucked up stuff, including some horrifying sections inside literal underground Viet Cong tunnels. Interesting. Huh. You know anything about this game?
Never heard of this. No, it was published by 2K Czech, though, which was kind of, I believe, succeeded by Hangar 13, which did Mafia 3, which we have talked about a few times on this podcast, but that's a side tangent. No, I've never heard of this. No. It was developed by 2K Czech and published by Gathering of Developers, God Games, as they're called. Anyway, no, I've never heard of this.
I do have to look. I haven't played this. It does sound like a game in which you are fighting as the Americans, essentially. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, I would be very impressed if they did it sensitively. It's like, there are lots of media that portray the Vietnam War as a horrifying thing for Americans to have to fight in, that are still really, really shitty about their depiction of that war and about Vietnamese people and everything else. So It sounds interesting though, and is also like, being made in the Czech Republic is maybe even American developers who are like, we don't want to touch that. And then internationally, people were like, hey, America fought a war. Let's make a game about that.
Jacob, this question's for you because I would say I have little to no relationship with what it's asking.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you guys have any particular thoughts on the Rotten Flash games that built Newgrounds and the larger Flash scene. I've always found it kind of wild that a generation of mostly teenage boys spearheaded an independent game movement that was, at least at first, absolutely flooded with school and office shooting games and various celebrity and politician torture simulators. The Newgrounds gun-wielding elementary school mascot Pico was created as a direct response to the Columbine shooting, which is something that I don't think would fly at all today, and rightfully so. I played a lot of these games well before I was allowed to go near Call of Duty or Resident Evil 4, and I suspect y'all might be in the same boat. That comes from Wyatt.
Oh, I got thoughts on this. Yes, because I was the same. I played a ton of Flash games as a kid and just kind of online browser games. It was always, my parents did their best to allow me age-appropriate media, but it's like, ain't no age gates on newgrounds.com, or not any that you couldn't bypass by just clicking, yes, I am 18. And so, yeah, the most horrifying things in these games, I mean, I remember, the one that I always remember is like George Bush White House shooter, which was essentially kind of looked like Time Crisis, and there were like people, essentially like Osama bin Laden or whatever, like popping his head into the office, and then you would shoot him, or other kind of like just generically Arabic coded characters. Yeah, Newgrounds especially was I think a lot. Do you have any? I mean, you said you didn't know much about this. Do you ever see like the Madness series, which was those things with like the little, they weren't stick figures, but they were little kind of cartoons. They had X's on their face. And the first one, oh man, this is a bonus minisode to watch all these. Because the first episode of Madness, which is this little online Flash animation, is just this dude like dancing by a tree.
Yeah.
And then someone comes in and just starts beating him up, and it just kind of escalates into like, shooting lots of people, and eventually he like fights Jesus and he kills Jesus, and it's very funny.
It does vaguely look familiar.
I mean, they were truly everywhere, and then they made like, I don't know, 10 more Madnesses, and by the end, the production value and the internal lore was so heightened, where there was like this evil clown that kept coming back, and they were unbelievably, they were basically people showing off their animated choreography skills in the same way that like stick man fights were a big thing early online. And yeah, they were incredibly gory. They were usually low budget enough that it still felt like it was at the level of like Happy Tree Friends, maybe like just it was cartoony. So I never found it too actually disturbing, but it was, I mean, it's like thinking back on Newgrounds, I'm like, oh man, that, the vibes there were just like proto Gamergate, essentially, in how those games generally talked about women and what kind of things were on there. And
how do you feel spending some of your formative years ingesting?
Oh, well, I think it worked out very well for me, and I have no, mental issues or hangups whatsoever about it. It is so, I feel like it's so influential, but for such a small slice, because of that particular brand of online games. I feel like it was like I was squarely in the target area and like 4 years to either direction, you would have totally missed it.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I actually didn't know. I mean, I remember the Newgrounds mascot. I did not know that it was a Columbine reference, but it doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
Is the Newgrounds indie game stuff the closest the game industry or game space has to a punk movement? and that a lot of creativity going on there and a lot of politically bad things.
Probably. I mean, now
Sure.
now I would say not. Now the more, like itch.io stuff is probably more punk. But yeah, definitely, things, and there were real games that came out of that. I mean, like Alien Hominid, I think, is the most direct one.
Yeah.
But things like Castle Crashers was like
Yeah.
that looks like a Newgrounds game just with a budget, and I think was made by people who did it.
Frog Fractions was a Flash game originally.
Well, that's still a Flash game.
Well, yeah, but you can like buy it on Steam and everything
Yeah.
now. Like, and I don't think that's a Flash
Yeah,
game.
but that, I mean, when did Frog Fractions come out?
2012.
Yeah, that was well after. I think that the heyday for this stuff was probably like 2006. Going on Miniclip, Addicting Games, Newgrounds.
Oh, I definitely played Flash games because I would go to Addicting Games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember that website specifically, but like none of the games really stand out to me aside from Jacob. Write this shit down. Line Rider, baby, and a game I still play.
Line Rider, something
Love Line
rotten.
Rider.
Yeah, well, this is really, I think, a thing that I've never really thought about before. But what made Newgrounds interesting and distinct from something like Addicting Games or Miniclip is that Newgrounds really did have a connection to the creator of something. That it put more precedence on, like, hey, you like this thing? Here's the guy who made it. Where Addicting Games and these other ones were essentially just aggregators, where, like, I had never saw any, kind of like, here's who made it, or, how I could follow other things. I would just occasionally be like, oh, they made a Heli Attack 3? Great, because I really liked Heli Attack 2. Whereas Newgrounds was kind of focused on people in an interesting way. So again, that is a thing that makes it stand out from those other more generic sites.
Newgrounds still around.
Is it?
It looks porny?
I mean, that was also true.
No, I guess not. Well, some. So, a little.
Yeah, look, that's always been a thing. Honestly, it is impressive that it is a site that allows some level of porn, and it's not the only thing on it, because I feel like usually if and I don't think that sex things should be barred from everywhere, but usually if you're like, hey, you could put a little porn on this site, then within like 30 minutes the entire site is just porn.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Newgrounds still kicking, still looks very populated.
I would love to know what the average age now is. Are they people who were on Newgrounds in like 2006, or is there a whole new like generation of Gen Zers who are discovering Newgrounds?
There's forums and everything on here. Wow, the more you know. Yeah, for whatever reason, this stuff completely kind of missed me. I don't know why.
I mean, I think maybe because you had access to real video games. Like, your dad was a gamer, right?
Yeah,
I didn't have...
That's true.
This was the only way that I played video games for a long time, because I did not have a console.
Also, like, I don't know, I felt we didn't have the internet in our house until like till I was in middle school.
That would do it.
And by the time we had the internet, like, I had MySpace and was really into like YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So like and E-Bombs World, of course. Like, I didn't spend, and to your point, like, I didn't spend much time playing games on the computer outside of, like, at school, so, I don't know.
Yeah, it is, I mean, truly just, like, it's so, you needed such a specific combination of, like, you had the internet, you didn't have a PlayStation, you had time on this. I mean, my other big source of gaming was checking out CDs from the library.
Oh,
I would get, like, Lego Island 2 from the library, play that, burn the disc, so then I could keep it. That was where I learned where DRM was, because I couldn't play Lego Star Wars, even though I burned a disc of it. I was like, why doesn't the disc work? All right. During the Manhunt season finale, you discussed the advertisement campaign for Hitman Blood Money and its sordid tones, and I couldn't help but remember an amazing print ad for Assassin's Creed 2 that I thought was relevant to your discussions on the show. In this, a pop-out bust of a Venetian-era Italian man is glued to both pages of the magazine, one to his head and other to his body, so that to completely see the ad and to open the pages, you had to essentially rip the man's head from his body. Under the spread, above the decapitated body, written in dark red over a crisp white background, was the sentence, "The first kill is always the hardest." I don't think a piece of media has ever made me feel such a feeling of responsibility and participation in the act of its violence, and I'm curious if you guys think it's possible to truly make a user or watcher of media feel like a part of an act like that, or if you think the barrier of experiences like that through the lens of media makes it impossible. The closest example I can think of is the movie Funny Games, which really tries to make you feel bad for watching. That is from Kyle.
My favorite Sheryl Crow song, "The First Kill is Always the Hardest."
The first kill is the hardest.
Baby, I know. You ever seen Funny Games?
No.
Come on. That's such a Jacob movie. It is both rotten and also just like this intense look at like media and media consumption and media literacy. Like media. Oh, Jacob, either watch the original Dutch version or the American remake, which is made by the same director and is literally shot for shot, just with a different cast and a different language.
Does it work?
I've never seen it, but I've heard it's really great.
Okay. Because those shot-for-shot things are always so weird.
Well, but it's like the same director, so I feel like he's bringing some. And I do think maybe... Anyway, Jacob, please watch Funny Games. It's like Michael Haneke, one of just the greatest modern directors, made a movie for Jacob Geller just when you were probably 7 years old. God, that's such a good movie. Jesus Christ. But Kyle is very... smart in bringing this up.
And do you agree with Kyle's assessment that the movie makes you feel like guilty for watching it?
Yeah. And it does it in some very interesting meta ways, which I think are very smart. That I don't want to spoil because I want people to watch it very badly. There's some like very good shocking moments where it flips the script on both the narrative of the film, but the viewer and their perceptions of how a story like Funny Games should work. And it's like, I won't say more, but yes, I agree with them.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm sold. This ad for Assassin's Creed 2 sounds wild. Mostly because Assassin's Creed 2 is not a game where you like decapitate people. You know, it's like it's not. Most of the kills in that are you just kind of like stick your knife in someone and they fall down. So it is really kind of, it's weird to think about the fact that they were selling this game on like, look how fucking gory this thing is.
Oh,
did you find it?
I think so.
Oh, I see. That's something. That's
something
really
rotten.
Interesting. Game advertisements used to be wild. I think it's interesting what Kyle said, that I don't think a piece of media has ever made me feel such a feeling of responsibility and participation as this magazine ad.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I don't know if I've ever felt responsibility in the act of violence in media. I mean, like more broadly, there's only like a couple things that have made me feel bad about willfully engaging with media, which is something like video games love to do. I would say no video game has ever really done that to me, but a few movies have.
Yeah.
Notably Ichi the Killer,
mm-hmm.
I think does this very well, and that 90% of its kills are very funny and slapstick. And then the other 10% are crucially not. And the idea is like, hey, why are you laughing at the other ones? Which I think it does well. It sounds dumb when you explain it like that, but I think the movie does it extremely well. But yeah, I've never like felt bad in the participation.
Yeah, you know, it's like that's something that like Spec Ops: The Line really tries to push. That's like a big part of it is like feel bad about this. I'll say second time I'm bringing up Disco Elysium in 5 minutes, which is just how I live my life. There is only one essentially like combat scene in Disco Elysium, and it can go really poorly. And in my playthrough, it did go really poorly, and I didn't feel bad to be like, oh my gosh, the violence I inflicted on others, but it was like people died that didn't need to die in that scene, and because that game makes every character such a like character, I did genuinely feel terror. I almost didn't want to play because I felt like I had like fucked up my playthrough because I had like let these people die, which I think is, an intended thing. So I've definitely, and that also, I think importantly, it does feel like you could have had a better outcome. So like almost a similar thing has been like in XCOM, when you have like, oh, your favorite soldier that you named after your best friend, and then you leave them out of cover and they get shot, like the feeling of responsibility for that, because it was actually something that you did and not something that the game essentially like scripted and then was like, look at what you did, which is what Spec Ops The Line does.
Original Call of Duty games, I feel like, do this where if you're playing worse as a player, you're like, friendly NPCs will die more.
Yeah,
and, like,
but
they're not like main characters, so it's like, it doesn't really matter and you don't really feel bad, but you'll notice like, oh, Private Dan just got shot and killed. Oh no, and like if you play better, I think more of them will survive.
Yeah, it is. I do like when games
from Jacob.
A big ol' yawn. I do like when games let you fail. I think it's interesting, but I also think it's hard to pull off in a way that feels like you have enough faith in the game to let you fail and not feel like you should just like reload a save point or something.
Watch Funny Games and Ichi the Killer.
All right.
In summation. Jacob, I'll be seeing you in May. I'm gonna bring Funny Games. We're gonna AJ and me are gonna sit your ass down and make you watch that.
Live recording of Something Rotten.
Oh, that would be interesting to do like a movie commentary. We used to do that at Game Query, and they were really popular within Game Query's metrics. Anyway, this is a bit of a longer question, but I think there's some interesting stuff here. This comes from Zed. I keep having this conversation with my dad about why I would want to seek out media that makes you feel icky. I argue that while I agree you have to be responsible for yourself and what you consume, when we engage with art like movies or games, we're constantly disavowing. There's always going to be a separation, and for me, it's enough to feel them than compartmentalize these more draining films and games to be able to engage with them as a piece of art made by a human. But there are plenty of people who aren't super interested in analysis or art for art's sake who still engage with this stuff. But now when I'm saying it out loud, it actually sounds less likely. It seems the audience I'm thinking of gets a genuine kick out of shock. Your horror junkies, I guess, as I like to call them, who seek out stuff like Slaughtered Vomit Dolls and a Serbian film just for laughs with friends. What the fuck? You know about those two films?
I know about a Serbian film. I don't know about Slaughtered Vomit Dolls.
We'll circle back to that because I think it's an interesting thing to bring up. Do you think there's a point to engaging with this sort of art if you aren't artistically minded? There are personal reasons my dad doesn't like engaging with the darker side of media. I think it's just a gulf of understanding or experience that rationalism can't cross, but it irks me that I can't rationalize why I'm drawn to such morbid stuff. What is it about this stuff for you guys? Why do you keep opening these cans of worms in the first place? I think it's an interesting question. It's something I think about a lot as someone who, has engaged with a lot of nasty shit.
Mm-hmm.
I think bringing up Slaughtered Vomit Dolls in a Serbian film is kind of interesting, and that a Serbian film kind of exists at this point just in a similar space as like Cannibal Holocaust and kind of Human Centipede, where it's like the mainstream has kind of claimed it, where it's like, this is one of those movies.
Right. Well, it's like I've heard of those, and I was surprised in our previous bonus episode when you told me like Cannibal Holocaust is like about something, because I had kind of lumped all these together as movies that are essentially meaningless and just just cruel for the point.
I understand why you do that. I think also like, and I don't mean this like as in no offense, please, when I say this. I do think that's like a narrow view of like extreme or shocking media that just like people have because of the nature of the media. So it's not a thing where I blame you or like you should be smarter. You know what I'm saying? Like I get it. I wish it wasn't the case, but like I also understand. Serbian film definitely does have a political message. Whether or not it's good, I don't remember. I mean, that movie is so garish that's like I don't remember if what it's saying about the Serbian government was really that interesting or engaging. But Slaughter Vomit Dolls, I would say, is largely void of, to the point of this question, largely void of any message, meaning, or artistic merit. I've never seen it. What it is just really rough vomit fetish porn made by Lucifer Valentine, who has some pretty serious allegations against him. So it's like, it's interesting to bring those two up. I think it's okay to engage with media, whether it's an Adam Sandler film or extreme media, and not think deeper about it.
You saying Adam Sandler films are not extreme media? Have you seen Jack and Jill, Blake?
But you know what I mean? Like, it's okay. I think it's okay to engage with things just for like their surface level intended purpose. And if like that's like gory or shocking films, I think that's okay. And I also think like you don't need to try to wrap your brain around them or like twist yourself into knots trying to understand why some people don't like them, why some people do like them. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about this?
I don't know. I mean, you know, as someone who, I will play basically any game, I am pretty squeamish about movies. Like, I'm not,
sure.
I do not watch many horror movies, let alone kind of, shock, whatever. You know, and part of that is just like, desensitization to, you know, honestly, I think that a you know, the reason that I don't watch them is because I am able, or like I empathize with the movie more than I want to. You know, it's like when I'm watching things, it works on me in a way that like horror games largely do not work on me anymore, because I've just played so many that I like, you know, even if I get scared, I am getting scared within the context of video games, which is a medium I understand. And as AJ said to me, yeah, well, the difference between games and movies is movies are real. You know, where I still...
All films are documentaries, believe it or not. Not a lot of people know that.
I think, you know, I think for people who don't want to watch those kind of things, part of it is that they can't put themselves at a high enough level above it to see the interesting things that they're doing, because they are more just like in with the you know, nitty-gritty viscera, and like a reason that I'm frustrated with myself often, because I love horror conceptually, and I like thinking about the themes in horror or whatever, but like I see a scary movie and then I can't sleep at night, you know, and I wish that I could only give myself that like 1,000-foot view of being like, let's talk about like what Hereditary is saying or whatever, but instead I'm laying in bed and I'm scared, and I don't like that. And so I think there is just that level of like, you can't view it artistically because you're too in it, you know, you are too just like, you know, in it. That is different than what they suggest in this question, which I also are totally people who exist who are just kind of like uncritical horror junkies who are like, oh, you got to see this movie, it's so fucked up. I certainly I find it very frustrating when and tell me if this has ever happened to you. You go see a movie that's like, you know, doing some really interesting things, operating on a high level, whatever, and you like get out and you're like, hey, what'd you think about that? And the person's like, oh, it was so like random, or like that, it was so crazy. And I'm just like, you know, come on, like let's take a step beyond like things happened that you didn't totally understand.
It does. There's also a part of me that's like, that's fine. You know, like,
look,
I don't
their
wanna...
job is not talking about media, so like, you know, they don't have to be. But I do think with some of these things, I don't know, I do kind of think that, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out if I think that like, if you were just watching shock movies and not thinking about them is like completely unmotivated gore, torture, assault, whatever. Like, is that fine to just take in uncritically? I kind of want to say no, but I don't know.
Well, I think there's a deeper psychological thing happening there that people maybe don't know is happening. And I think for a lot of people, that media, when they're consuming it, not through the lens of like analysis or criticism or whatever, it's actually just subconsciously their escape, like decompression valve.
Mm-hmm.
And people consume. Jacob has left. I've offended him.
Just getting a tissue.
I think a lot of people turn to that as a way to blow off steam, where it's not a thing where they necessarily like the violence or whatever it may be. It's they want to bring themselves to a certain point of uncomfortableness. And then once they get through it, there's this like dopamine rush, it's kind of like a roller coaster effectively, where it's like you see something and you're like, oh my God, I can't watch this. I can't watch this. I can't watch this. And then it happens. You've watched it and then it's over and you're like, you come down from it. And I think that is actually why a lot of people who don't want to engage with this like critically or whatever, why they will turn to stuff like that, which I think is whether or not they recognize that, I think that's a valid reason to like want to engage with shit.
Well, yeah, but isn't that like, because it's like on a roller coaster, you're not watching a depiction of human suffering, it's like when I go to Busch Gardens and I'm like, oh my God, I was so scared, but now I wasn't. I wasn't watching someone get attacked.
But okay, I guess here's the way I'm looking at it. Why I think it's okay sometimes is I may watch a movie like that twice a year, maybe less. So it's like that is a small percentage of my media consumption. And sometimes, like Quentin Tarantino said, I'm sorry, this is the second time I've quoted that idiot, it's just fun, like it just is fun. Like, I mean, I think if that's your only media consumption, there's a darker thing going on there that maybe you should work out as to why you like require that kind of stimuli. Mm-hmm. But like also once or twice a year, Jacob, I don't want to think about anything. I just want to watch fucking blood and guts, and I think that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that it's clear that I am not like dismissing people who do this. Right. I'm just kind of trying to work out, like I like the person like Zed who asked this question. I don't have a super clear answer, and I'm trying to kind of like work through it.
Jacob, like we sat and unpacked The Darkness 2 for hours and hours, and we said such smart things that the audience was amazed by. But when you boil down our conversations, we mostly liked when the fucking bodies got ripped open.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you just like that, and I sometimes want to watch a movie where I squirm? I squirm up to the point where the gross thing happens, and then it happens. And then I come down from it. I'm like, oh, I could watch that. I could see it. And now my brain is telling me I'm safe.
Yeah.
It's fine. And I feel better. Zed, I would tell you to look up the idea of benign masochism, which I wrote about in my shock site piece, which is this theory as to why people enjoy uncomfortable sensations. And may not be a definitive explanation, but at least is an idea as to why people ride roller coasters or eat hot food or look at nasty stuff.
Put Blake Hester on Hot Ones.
Oh, it wouldn't even be a problem. I tried The Last Dab 2 weeks ago.
Did you really?
It's not that bad. Yeah, it's not that bad.
I mean,
it's hot for sure.
I've always thought that the second to last, I think they make The Last Dab less hot than the second to last one.
I've heard the bomb is excruciating, and that's coming from boys in Kentucky. So, here comes the boys from the South. We can handle our heat. The Last Dab was not bad. I bet if I had it after 20 other hot sauces of varying degree of spice, The Last Dab would not be great. But I have heard the bomb is genuinely excruciating. Hey, do you know a better version of this podcast is available on Nebula? It's the same show, but with no ads, and you get to hear every episode a week before everyone else. And there's a full-length bonus episode included with every season. That means that if you're listening to this, there's at least one more episode of Something Rotten available to you right now, as soon as you sign up for Nebula. We'll even give you a custom RSS feed. You can continue listening in the podcast app of your choice. Apple, Spotify, whatever the hell you want. It's easy to set up, and you get all your bonus and early content delivered right to you. So when you sign up using the link in the description, you're getting all that extra stuff I mentioned, but you're also directly supporting more episodes of this show. Get more Something Rotten, as well as everything else on Nebula, by going to nebula.tv/somethingrotten.
We got some tweets about tweets and questions and everything about like Darkness, reboots, sequels, remakes. You know, I guess if you could wave a magic wand, make something happen, would you just make The Darkness 3 come out with similar gameplay to The Darkness 2, or would you do something more? I don't know, make the series again, or remake the first one, or, you know, whatever.
No, it'd just be The Darkness 3. The big difference would be Machine Games would be developing it, and it would just be, they'd just copy and paste the quad wielding over and give me some enemies and make it look better, and then I would have a good time. No, I don't know. You definitely go through heaven. Like, I want to see how that story was going to play out. Like, it leaves on such a bonkers cliffhanger that's like, I would want to see that just continue more than a remake or like reimagining. Like, it's like, where were you all going with this? Because it feels like
I agree.
It feels like you all were writing yourself into a corner, and the corner was the most gaudy thing imaginable.
As Ali Morgan wrote on Twitter, would love to see a sequel, but would also love for the love interest to not be fridged for the third game in a row. It's like, could they write that game without being like, oh, Jenny's dead or gonna die or something? Like, could they make her a character whose defining character trait wasn't she is dead?
I mean, well, I guess the end of Darkness 2, that's not really Jenny, right?
No, I mean, yeah, it would be. Yeah. I feel like if they made The Darkness 3, it'd be like, oh, there's that evil thing, and then he would, like, I don't know, beat a boss fight with it, and then Jenny would, like, come out for a second, and you'd be like, oh my god, Jenny, you're alive, and then the angel would, like, come back and kick you off a cliff. You know, I could write it. This is something that we talked about privately, but I do think we should just acknowledge. Arthur Unger informed us that Kane and Lynch 2 was written by Oliver Winding? Or Winding?
Yeah, Winding.
Was written by Oliver Winding, who is the nephew of Nicholas Winding Refn.
That's so cool. Also, shame on us for not doing better research, but that's so cool. I looked up Oliver Winding. Also, I said it with such conviction. I don't know. It might be Winding. I don't know why. I just was like, I know this. Winding. Looked them up. They also wrote Hitman Absolution, which I think would be a cool Rotten game. Mm-hmm. They're working on Machine Games IO Interactive's Project 007, the James Bond game they're making. And I saw that they were connected to Pusher, which was one of the first movies Nicholas Winding Refn directed, and the on-screen debut of Mads Mikkelsen. So there you go. I think they worked in like the casting department or some shit. I don't think they like were a big creative force behind it. But
here's a question about Kane and Lynch 2. How much of that game's success is due to the writing? You know, versus like the direction?
Well, Jacob, here's a sub question. What part of that game was successful?
You know, the part where you look at it and you go, oh my god, I've never seen a game that looks or sounds or feels like this. So I feel like that's not writing necessarily.
I think the writing was not good. It struck me as like a oh god, who's that guy? He did like not Danny Boyle, did Snatch.
Oh, Guy Ritchie.
It reminds me of some Guy Ritchie knockoff shit, but like from what I remember, Hitman Absolution, its story was interesting.
Yeah, there were nuns in latex. It was very interesting.
Look,
do you remember that ad campaign?
Come on, you think I don't remember them ladies? Shouts out to the queens. I think it's cool, whether or not he's a particularly good writer or not. Beside the point. I just think it's fun and cool, and I love Nepo.
Speaking of...
Is that nepotism? Is giving your cousin a job nepotism?
Maybe they just both got jobs, you know? Who knows? Clover Darling asks a question that I like. Are these good Mafia games? Are they like an interesting take on organized crime?
I don't think so.
Are there good Mafia games that are not called Mafia 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, those like isometrical games that are always advertised on YouTube.
Oh yeah, like level 1 mob, level 100 boss.
Crime City Vice Town, Grand Theft stealing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've only played the Mafia games, which I think all 3 are rad. I love all 3.
I mean, there are other games that are kind of about, it's like Katana Zero has like Mafia stuff, but I would not call that a Mafia game.
I mean, if we open this to broader organized crime, like...
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going.
Well, Sleeping Dogs, first and foremost, which deals with the triad. And then Yakuza.
Yeah, of course.
Which is like... which is rooted in a specific type of Yakuza media, which is like old school pre-Fukusaku Yakuza, where it's like the Yakuza's bad except for this one guy who's noble, and these men work on rules.
It's so funny. It's like the Yakuza's bad except for this one guy, and also eventually every single person that he meets.
Yeah.
Like, actually everyone in those games are good.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Kazuma Kiryu, a wonderful soul who I just love, and also probably tied to some really heinous crimes against people and humanity.
Yeah, it's like you never actually see, it's like I'm at like the end of Ishin now, and it's like turns out almost every character in that game actually has like a pretty good heart, like what?
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. Kiryu might not be a human trafficker, but he definitely knows a few.
Jesus.
Those are good Mafia games.
Are the Darkness good Mafia games?
No, I don't think so. I feel like it's so beside the point that he's a mafioso. Well,
I think 2 could have been. I think if you did more, and this actually relates to a question that that Shogo Mike asked, which was or just kind of thought, which was like, would love to see Jackie be a little more gamified as a mob boss. Or you could like send out things, which I think is an interesting idea, but also running and shooting is so fun in the Darkness too. I think I would be upset if the game made me do anything else. So it's hard to say like I wish I could send out my little goons on missions.
Here's a question I have for Shogo Mike. Please tweet at me the answer at Metallica is rad. Is your username a reference to Shogo Mobile Armor Division? Let me know. I doubt it, but it'd be cool if it was. You ever play Shogo Mobile Armor Division?
Nope.
First M-rated game Blakester ever played.
Oh, an important game. Actually, this is what I was going to say back with the Mafia games. I don't think you listen to the podcast Doughboys or Get Played that I listen to. One of the hosts, Nick Weiger, used to make shitty licensed games, and one of them that he worked on was like the Godfather video game.
Oh,
which I think had like a lot of original talent back, but was still like a bad game.
I think. Oh, who's the guy that plays the fucking offer you can't refuse? Who is that? Who's that actor?
You'll have to do a little more of an impression for that.
Oh, the fucking guy. It make you an offer you can't refuse.
Like Mr. Godfather?
Come to me on my daughter's wedding or some shit.
Uh-huh.
Marlon Brando. I think Marlon Brando's last role ever was the Godfather video game.
Oh boy, is that?
I think it was.
Let's see. Although the game was condemned by Francis Ford Coppola, who claimed Paramount never told him about its development or asked for his input, it does feature voice acting from several stars of the film, including James Caan, Robert Duvall, and Abe Vigoda. Marlon Brando also recorded dialogue for Vito Corleone in what would be his final acting job, but his ill health made most of his recordings unusable. Wow, that is the worst thing I have read today.
Anyway, I didn't know that guy worked on that. That's pretty interesting. Nick Weiger? Doughboys?
Yeah, that's right.
Is it wrong of me that anytime I imagine Doughboys or Blank Check, I just imagine the McElroy brothers as the hosts, even though I know they're not?
Yeah, Doughboys talks about cum like way more than the McElroys do.
Now, what's the difference then between them and Cumtown?
Doughboys eat fast food.
You telling me you don't think the hosts of Cumtown do? Have you seen those guys?
The difference is that I think
Friedland?
Doughboys is a good podcast that I listen to. Anyway, I think that's basically all our questions that we got today.
I think so.
Yeah. Anything else? The darkness, baby.
I mean, we got some in our email, but we'll save them for next time because I think they're just more general.
I do. I want to say I was doing something the other day where someone asked like what random game mechanic I would add to like every video game, and I think that more games should have cooking. And I was thinking about like how would Jackie Estacado cook? You know, would he have like a good pasta recipe from his grandma or his aunt?
Right. You know what I think they should add to every game?
What?
Blade mode from Metal Rising.
I mean,
Revenge.
The Darkness almost has blade mode. It's so close. Or the Darkness 2.
I think they should add it to literally every game. I'm saying like FIFA, add it.
That's right.
Kentucky Route Zero, add it. Every Newground game, go in and add it.
And you could add it to Newground games. Well,
and it'd be easy.
Until next time, my name's Jacob Geller. I have been with Blake Hester.
My name is Jacob Geller. I've been Blake Hester.
I've been Blake Hester. Machine games. We know you're busy with indie, but why not make The Darkness 3? Just make it.
Yeah.
Just make it for us.
Why not? Just for me. Send it to me. I won't leak it.